I wanted to always try to keep ours under an hour. I mean, ideally, I wanted them to be like 40 minutes. Ideally, I want them to be 20 minutes.
Welcome to Let's Break It Down, where we go behind the scenes at the White House to reveal how presidential events are planned, choreographed, and executed to prevent things from going terribly wrong. I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Barack Obama. Joining me today is Jon Favreau, former White House Director of Speechwriting for President Barack Obama. Hello, Favs.
What's up?
Welcome to Let's Break It Down. No spoilers. You've written many States of the Union.
States of the Union. I've written a few.
State of the Unions or States of the Union?
You just did States of the Union, and I like that. Let's go with that.
They're just SOTUs from here on out because that I know how to make plural. Favs, what are SOTUs?
A State of the Union address is the president delivering a speech to a joint session of Congress where he lays out his priorities for the year, basically.
And are they meant to make people feel good? Are they meant to inflame the other side? Is it really just as apolitical as you made it sound?
Alyssa, to be completely honest, I don't know what they're for anymore. Here's what they really are. This is
where people come for the truth.
Here's the real talk. They are laundry lists of policy proposals that you could read online. And so because you're still there in prime time and because the networks cover the State of the Union, one goal of the State of the Union is to try to have the president deliver a message to the American people and make sure that the American people understand the president's vision. And like you referenced in your question, yes, to make people feel good about the administration, about the country. It is like one of the rare moments in a given year where a lot of the country comes together and sort of watches the same thing on television. Like, we don't have that a lot anymore. You got the Super Bowl, you got the State of the Union, you got elections, you got maybe the Oscars, right? Like, there's not a lot of moments where we can all come together. So I think I always looked at it as a time where, okay, this is one of the few moments Barack Obama gets during the course of a year to have a huge audience in prime time. What should he tell the American people about what he's doing, what he believes, what he's going to try to do, what he's already accomplished, and then you sort of go from there.
Did you, in all of the speeches, all the SOTUs, did you always start with the State of the Union is strong?
The state of our union is the strongest it has ever been.
The state of our union has never been stronger.
The state of our union is stronger than ever before.
No, we tried to find different ways of saying that. There's one line at the beginning of the address that's like that where you get the first set of applause, aside from the initial round of applause you get just from walking in. And you try to figure out, all right, what is the line that we're going to land on that is going to be like the State of the Union is strong, but is different enough that it's going to get quoted and, just stand out a little bit more.
One woman wrote to me and said, "We are strained but hopeful, struggling but encouraged. It's because of this spirit, this great decency and great strength, that I have never been more hopeful about America's future than I am tonight."
Do you remember how our brains blew apart when we realized that members of Congress lined up early to get good seats on the aisle? So even if they were Democrats or Republicans, they wanted to be the people who shook the president's hand as he walked in, and they literally showed up at the crack just to hold their spots.
It's like the saddest, most Washington thing ever.
ever. This will be Biden's first address.
Mm-hmm.
And so technically they call it the address to the joint session of Congress.
Yeah.
Do you know why they do that?
I tried to look this up, and you can't find it anywhere.
But
you do found it. Good. What I remember. Well, let's see if my guess is right.
Okay.
This is what I've always thought. I've always thought that the first one is not called the State of the Union because for a president to deliver the State of the Union, they're supposed to be talking about, the State of the Union after at least a year of being president, because the president is reporting on the union. And if you've just taken office, you can't really give a report about sort of you overseeing the country for a year because you just got there. So they call it a joint address. And the joint address in the first year of the presidency is a relatively new thing. And I think it only goes as far back as Reagan.
This is
Aha.
correct. This is
Nice.
correct. President Reagan was the first one to change it from the State of the Union to the joint address, and everybody since him has kept up some version of that.
That's a little fun fact for you to actually all of your friends and family with. So when
They're
someone says, it's the State of the Union, you can be like, actually.
It's
not technically
Fabs,
called
that's the whole point of this fucking show. Okay, so now the part that is of most interest to me. Let's talk about writing the speech. How I know. And the thing is, the reason I love asking you this is because I've never asked you this question. I just saw it in real time and assumed. So now I'm going to get the real scoop.
Yep.
How does it start?
This is our process. So Barack Obama's in a meeting. I'm in the meeting. I believe Ben Rhodes was in the meeting because the years that I did that, I would often do the domestic politics section. Ben would do the foreign policy section. We would, in general, work on the speech together, through both sections together, edit each other, help each other through it. As the years went on, of course, Cody Keenan, Adam Frankel, Lovett, Sarah Hertz, the whole gang was in on the State of the Union. And we'd all experienced past States of the Union. We all knew that they were laundry lists of policy. And so that year, and by the way, every subsequent year, we would always have that initial meeting, and the initial meeting would start by us saying, it would be great to do something different this year, to not make it a laundry list, to make it more thematic, sort of a call to action to the American people, that we're just speaking directly to the audience and not to the people in the chamber. And we want to speak to people, and we don't want to get down in the weeds on policy. So let's make it shorter and bigger and more thematic. And then by the end of the process, it would be the exact same as every other State of the Union address in history. Because after that first meeting, where Obama would have some thoughts about what he wanted to say, the themes of the speech, then we would have a whole series of meetings with all of the different policy staffs, cabinet secretaries, policy leads, whatever, and they would all talk about the different policies that they wanted in the speech. And usually that process started around Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then we would sort of lose the president's focus all through December. And we really would, this was sort of a last minute-y thing. Like the day after New Year's into the State of the Union, which was either late January or early February, was basically a sprint to the finish.
So you have this dumpster of policy ideas that you have to fit into a speech. How do you and the other speechwriters go about making a cogent, something the American people will understand, which, as someone who sat through policy meetings and did work in the White House and rarely understood what was being said, your job was to make sure that people like me could understand it. So, how did you guys get from A to Z?
It's a great question. I think the first step was trying to assemble all the different policy components into a narrative or into a structure that had some logic and flow to it, that was a narrative. So sometimes there would be an overall theme to the State of the Union. I think one year it was about winning the future. It's a very original idea, I know. And then we try to make sure there was a logic to the argument, which is always important to Obama himself. We would try to figure out okay, what's the opening of the speech? What's the first thing we want people to hear, where we still have a very captive audience in the first 10 minutes? Then we get into the domestic policy sections. We try to say, okay, here's our healthcare spot, here's our education spot, here's our jobs and economy spot. So trying to categorize the policies into a few buckets was the first step, so that we can sort of whittle down the policy categories, so it wasn't literally here are my 25 policies. And then once we had a structure and an outline of the speech, then we would go through and write section by section and really try in each section to make the policy sound as accessible as possible, and to try to humanize them by where we could, telling stories about people, just getting some anecdotes in here and there. We just tried to break up within the speech dry moments with applause lines, with stories about people, etc., just so that we could keep it somewhat interesting.
So you have a pretty good draft. Obama's tinkered with it, and now it's time for practice. Usually it's we would call it prompter prep, where the president starts, delivering the speech. Did you find a lot of changes would come after you saw him deliver it a couple times?
Not many, no. I mean, well, keep in mind, he's not a huge fan of prompter prep in general for most speeches, but he was particularly not a fan of prompter prep for State of the Union because the State of the Union was such a long speech. Sometimes the first time he did prompter prep was literally a couple hours before the speech, and he would do prompter prep once. He would do one run-through of the entire speech. Then he would do a run-through of a couple sections of the speech, and then he would go upstairs to have dinner with Michelle and the girls, and that would be it. So he was like eager to get through prompter prep.
How would you guys decide? Was it with him? Was it without him? How do you decide if it's too long?
It was always too long. So I would that was sort of my role in this process is I was the one who would tell everyone in the federal government that the State of the Union is too long. And at one point I made a PAYGO rule. PAYGO is of course the nerdy law, not a great law by the way, or a rule in Congress where, you know, if you're going to add something to a budget, you have to take something away so that it doesn't increase the deficit. So I would say to Tim Geithner, whoever, if you are going to add a sentence to this speech or add a policy idea, you have to find something in that speech to take out because we are not adding any more words. Because, like, look, some of these speeches get really, really long. Bill Clinton was famous for ridiculously long State of the Union.
His is the longest ever.
Ever. And I think it was right after his impeachment, right?
It was an hour and 28 minutes.
Fucking nuts. I mean, like, nuts. So I wanted to always try to keep ours under an hour. I mean, ideally, I wanted them to be like 40 minutes. Ideally, I want them to be 20 minutes. but like, at first I was hoping for 40, and then by the end I was like, if we can clock in under an hour, I'm fine. But I really tried to make sure they didn't go over an hour.
Okay, so it is game day. Were there ever last minute changes that you had to like dash around and get updated in the teleprompter?
Yeah, oh, this was the best one.
Yeah, okay, good.
I think it was the 2011 State of the Union. Bill Daley was chief of staff, and the Commerce Secretary at the time was Gary Locke. Here's why this is important. There's a line in the speech about salmon. And the reason we had a line in the speech about salmon is because we were trying to talk about regulations. He said, for example, the Commerce Department is in charge of salmon when they're in saltwater, but the Interior Department is in charge of salmon when it's freshwater, when they're swimming in freshwater. And then he added a joke, and don't get me started on what happens when they're smoked.
Wait, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
But anyway, the joke wasn't the important part. The important part was literally an hour before the speech, after it had gone through like all fact checkers and policy research everywhere else. But Gary Locke and the Commerce Department were not happy because they believed that actually the Commerce Department does oversee salmon no matter where they are. Bill Daley, who had been a Commerce Secretary.
Oh, right.
Like, that's why it was. Yeah, because he was like, he was chief of staff, and he's like, I was Commerce Secretary. I know that this is true about the salmon. That's what's in the speech. So there was some little back and forth with Gary Locke and Bill Daley. But I remember them both like calling me really upset like an hour before the speech. And we didn't make the edit. He delivered the line, and a lot of people were upset.
I hear it gets even more complicated once they're smoked.
You know what my big job was every year for the State of the Union?
You had many important jobs around the SOTU.
I mean,
you were,
it's
like,
fine. No, let's be honest, please. I'd like to describe all of our jobs as like we were both landscape architects and we were also walking around with the pitchfork getting the garbage out of the bushes. Like we had our ups. All jobs have their ups and downs in the White House. But no, I was the person for many years who actually picked the designated survivor.
Oh, right.
I laughed because before everyone would be like, what is that even? And let me tell you something. After January 6th, I think people are very aware of what a designated survivor needs to do.
Yeah, no shit.
But it used to be such a big production because, you know, it's so extra because everybody wears their like good outfit. Members of Congress, cabinet, secretaries, all of them. Everyone comes dressed to the nines for their SOTU moment when the camera pans out, and nobody wanted to miss their chance to be on TV. And so it's like, hey, Tom Vilsack, Alyssa's calling you, and it's 2 days before the State of the Union. No one would take my phone calls.
What went into choosing the designated survivor? I always wondered that.
Well, Fabs, it is about as riveting as how you write a speech. Mostly you're like, okay, who did we do last year? What's going on in the world this year? And like, let's mostly try to make it a white man.
And then rock, scissors, paper.
Rock, scissors, paper.
Between like the agriculture secretary and commerce. No
and
offense,
it's like,
these are
look,
those
but then
jobs.
here's the problem is that I got all the back end of what you got front end, because they'd be like, I have very important sections in the speech. And there were times where you were so busy this time of year that I would go to your assistant or one of the other speechwriters and be like, this cabinet secretary is trying to tell me they have a whole paragraph. And they'd be like, oh, listen, like, we haven't told them yet, but no, that's not happening.
Oh, that's funny. They tried to use content in the speech to get out of being.
They
designated
did. Like, you
survivor.
can't. People are going to wonder where I am. And it's like, you're actually so important, Mr. Cabinet Secretary, that I need to make sure I save you in case anything bad happened.
Yeah, you're gonna run the entire U.S. government should something go awry.
Right. Go ask Kiefer Sutherland. He'll give you the whole scoop now.
Yeah, it's a whole.
So the speech is done, largely. And so then you start sort of socializing it around the White House, people seeing what's in, what's out. And we start doing, again, something that was started as a tradition by Ronald Reagan, which is reflecting some of the stories in the State of the Union with people who are invited guests of the First Lady in her box. And so I was thinking about this process because I remember when we left a vacant seat for victims of gun violence in the First Lady's box one year. So I went back down the rabbit hole because I was like, where did this all start? Do you know how invited guests started?
Didn't Reagan in his speech call someone out? I forget the guy's name.
Lenny Skutnik.
Lenny Skutnik. Yes.
Lenny Skutnik. So this is funny because when we were getting ready to do the first State of the Union and someone said, oh, we need guests. And one of the guys who used to work for Reagan left me a voicemail and said, if you need help finding your Lenny Skutniks, let me know. And I was like, what does that even mean? And I have to be honest, Fabs, I don't recall looking it up at the time. And so I looked it up now. And Lenny Skutnik in 1982 saved a woman who was drowning after Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the Potomac. And she couldn't get on the rescue helicopter. And Lenny Skutnik, he was a budget person. He jumped in and saved her. And so Reagan wanted to thank him. So he invited him. And from that point on, guests were referred to as Lenny Skutniks. And I thought about it and I was just like, God, Lenny, do you think I hope Lenny Skutnik knows that he had such an impact, right? Hey guys, if you like this discussion, if it taught you something about the inner workings of DC, helped clarify a complicated process, or just made you laugh, good news! We have more videos like this on our channel, so hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Now, back to the discussion. Theatrically, what are your favorite parts of the State of the Union? Like when you're watching it, what are you looking for? What entertains you? What makes you have any sort of feeling whatsoever?
Usually the end, because I didn't even mean that as a joke. Because at the end of the speech, a lot of presidents did this. Obama did this all the time. We'd often call out some of the people in the First Lady's box who had some kind of a moving, inspiring story. And so the only mystery of the speech every year would be, what's the ending going to be? How are we going to have a really inspiring, moving ending? I think my favorite of all the years that I helped write the speech was the year, I think this was 2012, when the president referenced the flag that SEAL Team 6 had given him after the bin Laden raid. And he talked about how they all had signed it and it's his most prized possession, and how they had all talked about how the only reason that mission was completed is because all of them worked together, and they were all from different places, and they were all from different parties and different races and different parts of the country, but they like came together as a team. And then he sort of broadened it out, and he's like, and just like back in the situation when we were watching, I was sitting there next to Bob Gates, who was a Republican, and Hillary Clinton, who I ran against for president, and we all worked together, and that's how this country has to be. It was a good story about the country coming together, and also it reminded people that he is a president and a unifying president at that.
Right. You know what my favorite part is? I like the hype people. I like watching the vice president and whoever the speaker is, like, because look, Nancy Pelosi and her claps, John Boehner and his eye rolls, and I realized I'm going to break history again when they deliver the joint address, because it'll be 2 women for the first time.
Yes.
I hope they wear matching outfits.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be so good. Did your family ever come? I mean, like, because here's the thing. We were all so young when all this was happening that I always felt a little bit like, no, I don't want my parents to see me. They're going to make me nervous. But did your parents ever come to a State of the Union and sit in the gallery and watch the speech?
Yes, my dad did. And you made it happen, I'm pretty sure.
I didn't. My husband did. DK did.
Oh, that's
because,
right.
For those who don't know, he was chief of staff to Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid at the time. And I said, is there any way I want to do this for Favs? One of his parents got to come see it. And Senator Reid said, is there anyone more important to the State of the Union than Jon? And he gave you one of his tickets.
And I remember after the speech, I was watching coverage on MSNBC, and Ed Schultz came on, and he was talking to Chris Matthews, and he said, I was just down there, and one of the people who helped write the speech, Jon Favreau, I met his dad, who was just the proudest person I've ever met of his son. I was like, what did my dad say?
That is so awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a cool moment. So thank you and DK for making that happen. Did you ever go?
No.
Were you ever in the chamber?
No. So, I mean, you're actually the one who broke it down for me, but it was like my dream because of the fucking American president. I'm such a basic bitch. And I was like, I have to see it. I have to see it. And they were like, okay, Precious, like, you so short, you're not going to see anything. Like, you're not going to see anything.
I did it once or twice, and you're in the back, and then every time the members stand up to clap, which is a lot,
you can't see.
You can't see anything. So I was just sitting back there like, I might as well be in my office. I could probably see a lot more by now.
But it was the people who were telling me I was too short at first were not you. And they were like, and I was like, you're just trying to steal my seat. And then you told me, and I was like, okay, then it's true.
Yeah.
That's okay, though. I watched it on TV. I ate, I'm sure, boneless buffalo wings, as I did for all monumental things between 2007 and 2014. Favs, thanks for breaking it down today.
Thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon.